Okay. So we are in always on I will build and disaster recovery solution topic ending. So in yesterday class we discussed about what is always on, how it is working, what are the prerequisites to configure always on, and what is the working procedure, how many methods, how many ways we can configure. We also seen failover process. So always on is working to we can configure in two ways: asynchronous commitment and synchronous commitment. We already configured in both ways, and after that we also seen failure process, how automatic failure will work, how manual failures work, and how to do the manual failover. Right. So we also discussed about DB patching, file adding, and user adding, and DR test. So these are very similar to mirroring, very similar. So there is no much differences. Right. So these are the things we discussed in yesterday class. In today's class, we are going to discuss about how to take backup from the secondary replicas and patching activity, and then troubleshooting, and then finally we'll discuss question and answers. Okay. So one of the benefit in always on is that again this option is not available in log sweeping as well as mirroring. The option is that it will allow us to take the backup from the secondary replicas. Okay, there is some limitations, but we can take the backup from the secondary replicas. So let me open my servers. Here, node 1 and node 2, we configure log sweeping, sorry, always in between node 1 server and node 2 server. Okay. Configuration information we can see under always in high availability, right? Here we can see that PinAP is working like a primary. We can also easily know that which one is the primary, which one is the secondary. Here we can see primary, right? In this availability group, we have a DB properties. Right? So, and then if you go to the secondary replica, first let me validate the status of this availability group. For validating and verifying, we can use the show dashboard. Yeah. So there is no errors or warning messages here. Everything is green, healthy, and running fine. Node to server. Right, it is working like a secondary, and it is in green and running symbol. Okay. So in always on, the one of the best option is that we can take backup from the primary replica. We can also take the backup from the secondary replica. But from secondary replicas, we can only take full backup and log backup. We cannot take differential backup. And again, when you want to take full backup, we have to use the copy only option. Without using copy only option, we cannot take full backup. Okay, so this is the one of the limitation for full backup. So that means the one point is that it will allow, secondary replicas allow us to take backup only full and log backup. You cannot take differential backup. And when it comes to the full backup, when you want to take a full backup, we have to use the copy only option. So these points you have to keep in mind. I will see that how to take backup from secondary. The same how we are taking the normal databases, how we are taking the backup from normal databases, the same way we can do that. Okay. DB properties is part of always an availability group. So for taking the backup, task backup. So when using the full backup, we have to use the copy only option. If you not use copy only option, we cannot take backup. First, let me add the location, and backup name is DB properties. Okay. So see that here we can got an error. The system, the restore command is not supported. Backup or restore command is not supported on a database, mirror, or secondary replica. Okay. So when you not use copy only option, you'll get this error message. But when you use when you enable copy option, it will allow us to take the backup. Now I'm enabling the copy only and click OK. So the full backup is generated for DB properties database. Clear? So when it comes to the differential backup, it won't allow us to support to take differential backup. Whether you are using copy only or not, it won't support differential backup. Copy only is disabled, and if you click and again OK button is grayed out. So that's mean only we can take full backup and log backup. And when it comes to the log backup, it will support whether you are using copy only or not using copy only. It will allow us to take the log backup. Okay. DB properties log.trn. I'm not using copy only, and it will allow us to take the log backup. Even if you want to use copy only, you can enable copy only, and we can take log backup. So very important interview question. Can we take backup from secondary replica? Yes, then what kind of backup it will support? It will support only full backup and log backup. You cannot take differential backup. Again, when you want to take full backup, then we have to use we need to enable copy only option, right? So this feature is only available in always on, even not, it's not available in mirroring as well as in mirroring and log splitting. In both configuration, it won't support, right? So that is the one of the, yeah. And the next one is that how to apply the patches. How to apply the patches on the always on configured databases. It is also very similar to mirroring and to apply the patches on always on configured databases. Okay, so now node 1. So then coming to the patching topic. So here node 1 server is behaving like working like a primary replica, and the secondary node 2 server is working like a secondary replica, right? So we'll apply the patches on these two servers, and we'll see that what are the steps we need to follow to apply the patches on these two servers. Okay, so before that, let me verify the here. Here we can see that HR app, we created the another availability group, and we added HR IND database in this availability group. Here it is in resolving state. It's mean when it is in resolving state, this is not working. This is not working properly. It's back to memory. Sometimes when you're restarting the server or maybe partner server is down, the time we can see the resolving state. So we have to wait some time to be synced, and then after that, if we refresh, then it will back to the normal state. Okay. Verify the both databases status by using show dashboard. Here we can see the status is healthy and synchronizing. Also verify the FinApp availability group. So that's mean again this is also healthy and synchronizing. That's mean these two availability groups are working properly. Okay. So now then we will apply the patches on these two servers. So I mean when it comes to the patching, whether it is a normal server, that's mean standalone servers, always on configured server or cluster server, whatever, irrespective of the type of configuration the server has, we have to follow the same steps, the same pre steps for the patching. That's mean informing to the server owners, getting the approval before starting the patching, taking the backup of all the databases. These are all the common steps for patch installation. Okay, I'm ignoring now. I'm directly going to the going to the patch installation step. Okay, assume that we completed all the prerequisites. That's mean pre-installation, pre-patch installation steps. Now, before starting the patching, the main steps, what we need to tell that we need to inform to the application people to stop the application. Okay, so this is the best practices. Even if you not stop, then there is no issue if you are doing in out of hours. But best practices are informing to the application team to stop the application until complete the patching. So that is the first step. The second step is that taking a backup of all the database. That is the common step. And the third step is that we need to change the failover mode. Go to properties, go to availability property, group properties. And if it is an automatic state, we have to change to manual. Okay, and also do it for another other available. Anyway, it is in manual state. Okay, now both availability groups are in manual state. The second step is that it is an optional. So the second step is that we need to suspend the data movement. Some people are following, some people are not following. Based on your organization standards, we can do that. So the best practice is suspended the data movement. So that's mean whatever changes happen at primary replica, those changes are not replicated to the secondary replica until we bring back to the resume state. Okay. So inform to the application people and get the confirmation, requesting them to stop the application. Once you get the confirmation from application team, so you just take the full backup of all the databases and go to the primary replica and change the configuration settings from automatic to manual and suspend the data movement. Once complete these steps on primary replica, then we have to go to the secondary replica, right? So we have to apply the patches on the secondary replica. So in our case, node to server is behaving, it's working like a secondary replica. So we have to apply the patches on node to server. Once patch has been successfully applied, we need to reboot the node to server. Okay. So after completing the patching on the node to server, after completing the reboot, we have again we go back to the node 1 server and resume the data movement. Okay, so once resume, then we have to fail over to the node to server. We already applied the patches on the secondary servers. Secondary server means node to server. So after rebooting, after node to back to online, we have to fail over from node 1 server to node 2 server. Okay, it's done. So now we have to do it for second availability group. Failover. Next. So this is asynchronous commit mode. When it is a asynchronous commit mode and you want to do the failover, we have to accept the confirming failover with potential data loss. Enable this option and click next and specify the secondary replica that is node to DR and click next, click finish. Okay, so now failover is completed for both databases of both availability group. Now node 1 server is behaving like a it's working like a secondary replica, right? So because after failover role will changes, primary became secondary became primary, right? So now the next step is that after failover and after everything is fine, then we need to apply the patches on the current secondary. Current secondary means node 1 server. Node 1 server. Here we can see this as secondary. So apply the patches on node 1 server and reboot the server, and the server after back to online, then we have to go to the current primary node and we have to change the configuration settings back to automatic mode. Whatever settings before, the same settings we need to apply. So here FinApp is in automatic state, and then HR app it is in before it was in manual state. Okay, whatever settings it was before before starting the patching, the same settings we have to assign to the availability group. Okay, So if you want to fail over to the other node, we can fail over, or else even if it is running from secondary replica, if your standards, if your organization standards are accepting to run the availability groups on secondary replica, then that would be fine. In some organizations, they prefer to run always availability group from the product and DR server, I mean the primary server. That's mean one specific server. So in our organization, whether the availability groups are active on primary server or production server or DR server, so we don't have any issue. But in some organization, they're specifically running the availability groups on one particular server. If we have it the kind of standards, then we have to fail back to the previous server. Again, when comes to failover, click failover, click next, next, specify the server, click next, click finish. Okay, it's completed. Also do it for HR app availability group. And click finish. Completed. Okay. Refresh, so that's mean now node 1 server will work like a primary server. Go to the availability group and validate the availability groups. For validating, we can use the show dashboard, and here we can see the LD and then synchronize it. Do it for other availability group. Show dashboard. Yeah. Here we can see that. Here we can see the warning. Some availability replicas are not synchronizing data. That's mean the HR app availability group is not LD, right? So go to the database, availability databases. Here it is in suspended state. Here we can see the pause button. So we have to click the resume data button. When you do the failover, or maybe some partner server down or came online sometime, the database will move to the suspended state. Okay. So bring to the running state and refresh here. Again, it's a node 1 server database is running healthy and running fine, but here we can see node to server database is not synchronizing. Again, go to the node to server. Again, it is in suspended state. We have to click resume data moment. Okay. Now go back to the node 1 server. Both databases and everything is in healthy and synchronizing and running fine. Right. So this way we can do the failover. So not failover, the patching thing. Like the first step is that getting the approval. The second step is that noting all the information, taking the backup. And before doing that, we have to inform the application team to stop the application. Once you get the confirmation from the application team that the application has been stopped, then we have to go to the primary replica, and we need to change the failover settings from automatic to manual. Once complete the step, then we have to, some people prefer to suspend the data movement. Even it is an optional, it is not mandatory. So if you want, you can suspend the data movement, or else you can ignore and directly go to the node to server. That means secondary replica, apply the patches on the secondary replica, reboot the secondary replica. Once complete that, back to the primary replica and current primary replica to secondary replica. Once failover is done, then the node 1 server, in our case, node 1 will be work like a current secondary replica after failover, because after failover role will changes. Primary became secondary, secondary became primary. Apply the patches on the current secondary, reboot the server, and go back to the current primary replica and change the failover settings if it is in manual, and if you prefer to automatic, change the connection string based on the configuration, and if you want to failover to the previous node. So these are the steps we need to follow to apply the patches on always on configure databases, right? So the disaster recovery testing is same, so very similar to the mirroring. So for example, currently node 1 server is behaving like a it's working like a primary replica. So if we want to do we want to conduct the disaster recovery testing, so we have to take a backup of the databases, whatever database in availability group, take a backup of all the databases and validate the whether we have a proper the same security at primary and secondary. The both the database have same security. Then after that we have to failover. Once failover, we have to inform to the application team that the failover has been completed and currently so on the server active. So once complete the testing by the application team, then after we have to fail back to the previous node. Okay, so that's mean in the disaster recovery testing, whether it is a log flipping, whether it is a mirroring or always on, our task is failover, and before that taking the backup of the database and ensuring to have the same security between two databases. So these are the three steps you need to do as part of disaster recovery testing, whether it is log sweeping or mirroring or always on. Clear? So that's about the patching and disaster recovery testing. And if we're clear about these things, so one important thing is that when it comes to the mirroring, so when you want to use the automatic failover in mirroring, we require the witness server. So we, as I said, that witness server is continuously monitoring primary principal server, and if principal server is not responding in certain period of time, then it will think that the principal server is down, and the witness server will inform to the mirror server to come to online. So that is the process. That is a role done by the witness server. But when it comes to always on, without using third instance, it is controlling automatic failover. How it is controlling automatic failover? In sense, always on depend on the Windows cluster. Windows cluster is responsible for doing the automatic failover. Okay, so just note that point here. So why don't we require third server? Like in the mirroring, we require the third instance witness server to complete the automatic failover. But in always on, we are not using third instance or third server to controlling the failover. So which one is which component is controlling the failover? If we get this question, we have to tell about Windows cluster. So always on is depend on Windows cluster. Windows cluster service is responsible for automatic doing the automatic failover. Okay, so that is the way we can tell in interview point of view. In later classes we will discuss about clustering. We'll, when configuring clustering, that time we'll understand more about Windows cluster and Windows cluster working mechanism, right? So that's about the how it is controlling automatic failover means Windows cluster. With the help of Windows cluster, the failover will control, or maybe will happen, automatic failover will happen. Right, clear? So that's all for always on. Now we'll move to the troubleshooting. So what are the common issues, and then troubleshooting places, and then finally interview question and answers. So always an is an advanced concept of database mirroring. That's mean whatever prerequisites you require for mirroring, the same we require for the always an, as I said that. So when it comes to the common issues for mirroring, whatever common issues we discussed for mirroring, the same will applicable for always on, right? So mirroring is mainly depending on network. Always on is also depend on the network, and apart from network, always on is also depend on the Windows cluster. If you remember yesterday when you discussed about prerequisites, one of the main prerequisites for always on is always on servers. Whatever servers are participating in always on, want to participate in always on, those servers must be part of Windows cluster. So that's mean always on is also depend on the Windows cluster. So that's mean when there is a dependency, the dependency is having problem that will impact the always on. So mirroring is depending on the network problem, firewall, and right a firewall. So firewall related and cable change, or maybe endpoint corrupted, endpoint deleted, or maybe somebody modified the endpoint. When these kind of operations happen, so those will impact it on the mirroring. The same thing will applicable for always on. When somebody changed the endpoint, when somebody deleted the endpoint, okay, or maybe SQL Server Service account not having permissions and endpoints, right? And maybe the network firewall is blocking the port numbers and mirroring endpoint port numbers, okay, or maybe the network service is down, okay. So these are all the common issues for always on. And apart from that, so sometimes we'll also have a problem because of the database primary database data file full, log file full, or in the secondary replica data file full or log file full. When we have this kind of problem, again the data movement will not happen, and we are getting errors to access the database from the application. And apart from that, maybe sometimes if primary server is down, or maybe secondary server is down, okay, that will also create a problem. And when it comes to the Windows services, so when you configure Windows cluster, Windows services will be added in the particular operating system. Windows services information we can see services.msc. Here we can see that cluster services. It is in a running state. Sometimes if somebody stopped, or maybe for unknown reasons, if it is corrupted or maybe stopped at that time, that also impacted the always on working procedure. Okay, so when you enable the Windows cluster services will create one cluster services. I mean, the cluster services created on the particular operating system. Okay, so these are the common issues which we encounter in always on. Okay, now then coming to the what are the places we need to verify to identifying the call. Okay, so we can use the three different ways to identify or verifying the always on process. One is that always on dashboard. Go to show dashboard. Here we can see the errors. Again, if a particular database is not synchronizing, not working, or down, the information also we can see that. Here we can see the issues tab. There we can see the issue information. Okay, here we can also see that error information. Okay, the next one is that here we can see always on health events. Okay, so this is also very useful for troubleshooting. So if you want to troubleshoot, first you have to identify the errors or maybe problem. So the kind of information, errors or warnings, failure information, here we can see that we need to diligently verify the errors here. Second option is that using uh, health events. Okay, the third one is obviously SQL Server error log. So SQL Server error log information you can find under management and SQL Server log. So here we can see the errors information. Okay, and so there is a extended events. Later we'll discuss about the topic. So we can also use the extended events to identify the always and related error information. And this is very identical with the health events in dashboard. So extended events information we can see again under management, extended events. Expand the sessions. There we can see always on health. So click view target data. View target data. So here we can see when was the failure is happen, error related information, which node failure is happen, a kind of all this kind of information we can see that. So either we can use the external events or we can use dashboard. Go to the dashboard. So dashboard, there we can see view always in health events. View always in health events. When you click this button, again it will go to the external events. It will generate. We can see the all the information. And then obviously the recommended one is that SQL Server error logs. So these places we can use to identify the cost to troubleshoot the always on. So cluster related logs. For doing that, go to run command, type clue admin.msc and click OK. And here we can see the, let me wait some time. So, yeah. So what are availability groups you created, those information we can see under roles in Windows Failure Cluster Manager. Right click, here we can see the critical events. Right, there is no critical events related to the always on. If you have anything, we can yeah, here we can see that. So there is no critical events for FinApp availability group, but we have seen some of the errors for HR app. Okay, so this is also very useful if it is because of the network or maybe cluster, especially Windows cluster related, the kind of information we can see it here. Okay, so these are the places we can use to verify the always unrelated errors information. Right. So we have two or three scenarios, troubleshooting scenarios that I'll cover it in troubleshooting classes. Right. So just here we understand what are the common causes for failing the always on, and what are the places we need to verify to identify the cause. Okay. So when it comes to the troubleshooting scenarios, we have I think two or three scenarios that I'll cover it in troubleshooting classes. Okay. Now we'll move to the interview question and answer topic. Okay. Let me. Okay. So now we'll discuss about interview question and answers. What is always on in SQL Server 2012? So always on is a high availability and disaster recovery solution, which is available from SQL Server 2012 and above version. In 2012 and 2014, it is only work on interface edition. From 2016 onwards, it will work on standard edition. Okay. So it is an high availability, database level, high availability and disaster recovery solution. What is the next question is what are availability group? Availability group we can define as a container to holding always on configured databases. Like here, we created availability group, right? So HR, APP, and FinApp, these two we can call it as a availability group. So in availability group, we can see always on configured databases. So that is the reason we can say it will work like a container for holding always on configured databases. So that's about the second question. And move to the next one. What are availability databases? Availability databases mean the databases which are configured for always on. Whatever databases we configure for always on, those databases we can call it as a high availability or availability databases. So which SQL version which SQL Server version edition include always an availability group. SQL Server Enterprise Edition in 2012 and 2014. From 2016 onwards, it will work. We can also it will work on standard edition as well as enterprise edition. Okay. So what editions on Windows Server support always run? Again, it is enterprise edition. Moving to the next question. How many replicas can I have in always run availability group? So in 2012, we have one primary replica, four secondary replicas. Total we can say five. And from SQL Server 2014 onwards, we have one primary replica and eight secondary replicas. Okay. And moving to the next one, how many databases can be configured in always an availability group? So up to 100 is a recommendation, but it is not enforced. Because if you want, you can also configure more, but the recommended value is 100 availability groups. Okay, so move to the next one. Yeah, so we missed the one. How many availability always and availability groups can be configured in always and is 10 availability groups is the recommended, but it is not enforced. Availability groups are 10, and how many databases can be configured in a always an availability group? So 10 availability groups are recommended, and each availability group we can place 100 availability 100 databases. So that is the recommended. If you want, you can also place more than 100 databases in availability group. Yesterday I gave the wrong 100 availability groups and 1000 availability databases. That was wrong. So the recommended is 10 availability groups, and for availability group, the recommended database count is 100. If you want, you can also create more, but these are the Microsoft recommendations. So if we clear about 7th and 8th question, then the next one is what is availability mode in always run? So availability mode property define the kind of configuration like asynchronous commit or synchronous commit mode. So that is defined by the that is we can call it as a availability mode. We have it two availability mode: asynchronous commit and synchronous commit. So move to the next one. Do we need SQL Server cluster instances to configure always run? No, we don't need SQL Server cluster instances to configure always run. So we have a two type of SQL Server installation. So far we discussed about only the one installation that is called a normal or standard installation, and maybe in SQL terminology we can call it as a standalone installation. So there is another SQL Server installation that I will cover in later classes that is called cluster installation. Okay, cluster installation. So the question is that do we need SQL Server cluster installation or instances to configure always run? We don't require. We don't need a cluster installation. That means we can configure always run in standalone servers. You can also configure in cluster services, but it is not mandatory to have cluster instances to configure always run. It is totally optional. So then move to the next question. Do we need shared storage to configure always run? Again, no, we don't need the shared storage. So in real-time environment, we can see two different type of storage. One is physical storage, and the second one is that shared storage and maybe network storage. It's mean physical storage means the storage directly attached to the operating system, that we can call it as a physical storage. Our laptops are directly attached to the storage. Those storage you can call it as a physical storage. The second storage is that shared storage and maybe network storage. That's mean the storage is stay somewhere and is using the tools we can connect to the operating system. It is not directly attached. Okay, virtually if you add here you accessing the storage, the kind of storage you can call it is a shared storage or maybe network storage. Again, so these things we will discuss in cluster configuration in the later classes. Here, based on this question, do we need shared storage to configure always run? We don't need. Even using the physical storage, we can configure always run. So moving to the next question. How many availability group modes are supported by Always On? Always On will support two availability modes: asynchronous commit mode and synchronous commit mode. So moving to the next question. What is asynchronous commit mode and synchronous commit mode? Asynchronous commit mode means whatever data comes from application, first the data commit at principal server, later the data will transfer to the mirror server, sorry, not principal mirror. So whatever data comes to the primary replica, after committing the data at primary replica, later the data will transfer to the secondary replica. And primary replica doesn't care whether that is committed or moved to the secondary replica or not. So this kind of working methodology, a mechanism we can call it is a asynchronous commit mode. Asynchronous commit mode, right? The second one is that synchronous commit mode. Synchronous commit mode means whatever data comes from application, first the data will go to the primary replica. Before committing the data at primary replica, those log data will send to the secondary replica. Once secondary replica received the data from primary, secondary replica sent a confirmation, send a message to the primary replica. Okay, so once I received the primary replica, at a time data will committed primary replica and secondary replica. This kind of working mechanism we can call it as a synchronized commit. Okay, so if we clear about it, move to the next question. What is called primary replica? Primary replica means production server. Simply you can call it as a production server, or maybe primary replica means which server is accepting read and write operations. Is serving which database is serving business operations directly. Those kind of databases we can call it as a primary replica. Secondary replica. Move to the next question. What is secondary replica? Secondary replica is a standby server or standby database. It is only receiving the data from primary replica, and based on the configuration, it will allow us to read the data. So just it will simply stand the server. So when primary server or database server is down, then secondary will become a primary, and it will serving the business operations. We're clear about it. Move to the next one. Next question. What is availability group listener? If you remember, yesterday we configured the listener, right? And we connected the availability groups using listener. So listener means virtual server name. Listener means virtual server name or maybe alias name for the availability group. So using the listener, always we can connect a primary replica. So using the listener, it is always pointing to the primary replica. If clear about it, move to the next question. What are readable secondary replicas? What are readable secondary replicas? That means if you enable readable options, so there is a three options: no, yes, and a read intent only. If you enable yes for readable, so and if you're using for read only operation, those databases you can call it as a readable secondary replicas. What are the benefits of readable secondary replicas? So using when you enable readable secondary option, so we can do this. We can use it for reporting purpose. We can do the all select reporting operations, and it is also another advantage is that we can reduce the burden on the primary replica. For example, if we have a 10 users and 5 users are only doing read only operations and 5 users are doing read and write operations. Like whoever doing the read operations, instead of granting access to the primary replica, we can grant access to the secondary replica because the 5 users who are doing the read operation only connect to the secondary replica, not the primary replica. So eventually it can reduce some kind of burden on the primary replica. Okay, so this kind of mechanism we can call it as a load balancing. That is one of the major advantage of readable secondary replicas. So moving to the next one, how many synchronized secondary replicas can I have? Okay, so that means we can configure always in two different modes: asynchronous commit mode and synchronous commit mode. In 2012 and 2014, we can only, I think 2012 only we can use two synchronized replicas, but from 2014 onwards, we can have three synchronous commit mode and remaining we can use it for asynchronous. Right? We can configure in two modes, asynchronous and synchronous. In 2012, only two replicas we can use synchronous commit mode, but remaining we can use asynchronous. From 2014 onwards, three we can use it as a synchronous commit replicas, and remaining we can use it as a asynchronous commit replicas. Okay. And if we clear about it, then move to the next one, that is 20th. Can we use secondary for reporting purpose? Yes. So reporting means read only. If you enable S button, readable as, then we can use it for reporting purpose. So move to the next one. Can we use secondary replicas to take the DB backup? Yes. So we can take the backup from secondary replicas, but there is a limitation. So about limitation for the full recovery, full backup. When you want to take a full backup, we have to enable copy only option. Without copy only, we cannot take. When it comes to the differential, in any case, it won't allow us to take the differential backup. And we can take the log backup without and with using copy only, you can take log backup from secondary replicas. Let's complete what all type of backups are possible on secondary replica. That then, can we take transactional backup on secondary replica? Yes. And what is failover? So this is this terminology common for all IAM and disaster recovery solutions. Failover in the sense role changes. So this means production will become it will become secondary. Secondary will become primary. So role changes we can call it as a failover. Production will DR will production after failover. How many types of failover are supported by Azure? So actually we can define the two different type of failover. One is that automatic failover. That means without manual intervention, if failover is happening, that we can call it as a automatic failover. The second one is that manual failover. If we do the failover manually, then we can call it as a manual failover. So when it comes to the always on, in always on we can define three different type of failovers. One is that forced failover, forced failover, forced manual failover, and automatic failover. So forced failover in the sense of forced manual failover in the sense when the configuration is related to asynchronous. If configuration is asynchronous commit mode, we cannot. We have to accept the data loss, right? After enabling data loss option only, we can do the failover. That means this kind of failover we can call it as a manual forced failover. In always and we can say three different failovers: automatic failover, manual failover, and forced manual failover. So forced manual failover or manual failover, we can call it as a planned manual failover also we can call it, because usually when there is a planned activities, like when you're applying the patches or when you're doing the any kind of maintenance activities related to hardware, or maybe the kind of like Windows patching or Windows hardware changes, when you're doing this kind of, you're doing the failover manually. If it is a asynchronous commit mode failover, then we can call it as a manual or forced failover. What is planned manual failover in the sense? So generally this will happen in synchronized commit mode. If you do the failover manually, then we can call for the synchronized configuration we can call it as a planned manual failover. Usually we do when you're conducting disaster recovery testing or patching or maybe any changes related to hardware. Okay. Automatic failure in the sense without manual intervention, if failure is happening, that we can call it as a automatic failover. Without manual intervention, the failure will happen. So move to the next question. Can we configure automatic failover of availability group with SQL Server failover cluster installation? As I said that we have two different type of SQL Server installations. One is standalone installation, so far we covered, and the second one is that cluster installation. Okay. So always when we can configure standalone servers as well as cluster configure server. The recommended one is that only standalone server. But if we configure always on cluster configure instances, cluster configure servers, it doesn't support automatic failover, even if you select synchronized commit mode. Okay, that's mean the answer is no. Can we configure automatic failover? Availability groups with SQL Server failover cluster instances that doesn't support. What are the failover types supported under asynchronous commit mode? Right, we already discussed. When it comes to the asynchronous commit mode, it doesn't support automatic failover. It supports manual failover. But when you do the manual failover, we need to accept data loss. Right? So the failover with the acceptance of data loss, the kind of failover we can call it as a planned forced failover that will happen in asynchronous commit mode. And the final question is that what is the use of always on dashboard? So using the dashboard, we can monitor, we can verify the health of the always on. How always on databases are in the current state. They're synchronizing, synchronized, suspended, pending, failed. So all this kind of information we can see that. And apart from that, apart from monitoring, using dashboard, we can also do the failover using the dashboard. And the second one is that we can also verify the error information in the dashboard. For monitoring and then troubleshooting purpose and failover purpose, we can use always on dashboard. So right, so these are all. That means this is the final question, final interview question. There is no further question. And again, so we discussed about in mirroring, we discussed about different states. Okay? Synchronizing, synchronizer, suspending, pending failover, right? And synchronizing, 5 states: synchronizing, synchronizing, suspended, and disconnected, and pending failover. So whatever states, whatever states information is applicable for mirroring, the same for always on. Synchronizing in the sense currently data is transferring while the data is moving from primary to secondary. The time we can see the synchronizing state. Synchronizing in the sense the data is exactly the same data exists at primary and secondary. The kind of situation we can see it is a synchronizing. And the disconnecting means when partner server is down, that we can see disconnected state. Suspended means when the data is not moving from primary to secondary replica, the time we can see suspended state. And the pending failover, if it is a use amount of, if the database contains use amount of time, use amount of data, the failover will not happen instantly. It will take some time. The time we can see pending failover state. Okay. So whenever we do the failover, whether it is a manual failover or automatic failover, whatever it may be, so we have to, after complete the failover, we need to validate the always on dashboard. We have to verify the databases availability group status using the dashboard. Sometimes what happens even after completing the failover, we can see the disconnected or maybe suspected states. When the communication is not happening, the time we can see suspended. So we have to verify, and if data is not in synchronizing, then we have to verify if the database in suspended state. We have to manually bring to the resume state. Right. So that's all for today, Andy. And we completed always on as well with today class. And the next class is that replication. Again, replication will take 2 to 3 classes. So probably Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It will take 3 classes to complete, and we'll cover clustering after completing the entire course. So that's mean because it's required I think 6 hours time to complete the clustering. It's a time taken topic. We'll cover after completing all the topics. That's mean after completing replication, then we'll jump into troubleshooting. Okay, so we'll move to the troubleshooting, performance tuning classes. Probably from Monday onwards, we will discuss the performance tuning classes. Okay, so here log sweeping is a pure disaster recovery solution, and database mirroring is a high availability and disaster recovery solution. And again, both again mirroring is also database level. In always on is also database level. Again, it will also support high availability and disaster recovery solution. So these are all we can call it as a database level, entire database. So replication, a replication is a object level. Objects means tables, stored procedures, triggers, functions. This we can call it as a object. We can also set the disaster recovery solution on object level using a replication. Okay. If it is a database level, either we can prepare log sweeping, mirroring, and always run. If it is an object level, we have only one option, that is replication. And if it is for entire instance, no, I don't want for object, I don't want for database. I need it for entire instance. So in that case, we can use the clustering. Okay, right. So these are the 5 mechanisms we have for setting up high availability and disaster recovery solution. If you want, you can do it for database level, object level, or instance level. Instance or maybe server level, we can call it. Right. Right. When customer is not aware, like maybe, so I maybe sometimes what happen in interview point of view, maybe in the real time, maybe, so can you give me the suitable high availability solution, so which we want to use for our application. When you get this question, so we cannot say that only the one is the best one, because each one has its own advantage and disadvantages. So we have to explain about what is log sweeping, what is mirroring, and always and we have to tell about advantages and disadvantages. Then we have to give an option to select the way whatever you feel suitable for his application. Right. So in the log sweeping, we can it is a disaster recovery solution. It doesn't support automatic failover, manual failover. All right, manual failover we can do that. So and we can use the n number of secondary replicas. If customer is mainly preparing for n number of secondary replicas, maybe more than 10 or 20, and if you wanna use it for if you want to use it for read-only purpose, then the log sweeping is the best, but it doesn't support. When it comes to the mirroring, like your customer looking for automatic failover without manual intervention, and if we don't want to lose the data, then we can prepare the mirroring. But Microsoft is strongly recommended to use the always and from SQL Server 2012 and above, because from 12 onwards it will always and will support, and it is an advanced concept of database mirroring. And whatever limitations in the mirroring, every all will, I mean whatever all limitations are overcome in always on. So nobody prefer to use the mirroring nowadays. If they want to use the kind of functionality, they are preferring to use the always on. Right. Again, in always on, what we need to select means, again, if it is asynchronous commit mode, we need to accept data loss, and it doesn't support automatic failover. If customer is mainly looking for automatic failover and if don't want to lose the data, then we have to recommend it to use the synchronized commit. Hey. Okay. So that's all for today, Andy. So if you don't have any questions, then if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. If you don't have anything, then we'll wrap up now and then we'll catch up on tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andy. So I'll send the documents. Please refer the documents, and if you get a time, please watch the video. If you have any questions or something, if you don't understand, or maybe you can send me a message if you don't clear about anything. Okay. Thank you so much for joining. Have a nice day. We'll catch up on tomorrow. Until then, bye. Thank you.